On Sunday, the San Francisco 49ers finally closed out this very difficult year against a team that maybe had something to play for, maybe didn't. It would depend on how other games went during the day. So Seattle should have been a very motivated team against a 49er team that had their third string quarterback, was missing Trent Williams, didn't have either of their two starting wide receivers, and is just missing a ton of key pieces all around. They did have George Kittle for this game. And this game was surprisingly close, which I consider to be a testament to Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh. So let's get into the film. Now, you may have noticed while I was talking that the 49ers had handed the ball to Kyle Juszczyk on a 3rd down and 1, and he was stopped short of the line to gain. Ordinarily, Kyle Juszczyk would be the lead blocker for Jeff Wilson Jr. on this play. Instead, the 49ers try something different. Jeff Wilson Jr. fakes like he's going to the outside. And Kyle Juszczyk will take a handoff and try to take the ball himself. Now, in order to sell the fake to Jeff Wilson Jr., you see C.J. Beathard turn the wrong way on purpose and hand the ball behind him to Kyle Juszczyk. Now, that seems a little cute. Why would they do that? Well, John Madden always used to say that handing the ball to the fullback in this situation never works. And it usually doesn't. But the 49ers have found some success with Kyle Juszczyk in these short yardage situations. But he doesn't have a lead blocker here because he is the lead blocker. So that's why they try this little bit of a fancier way of handing the ball off here. Now, the play doesn't succeed because the defensive end Collier does a great job of just backing Ross Dwelley down into position where he can make the tackle. Now, this sets up, already, very early on, the first interesting decision of the game. It's true that Kyle Juszczyk didn't get the first down, but he did gain a little bit of ground, so it's 4th and inches here. Now, the 49ers are on their own 34-yard line, so it's very risky to go for it. We talked about this last week with this field position. But you only have a few inches to go, and to win a game like this, you got to keep number 3, Russell Wilson, on the sidelines. It's possible the Niners could have gone for it here, but ultimately, given the risks, I think Kyle Shanahan made the right decision to punt this ball away. So the Seahawks get the ball, and they're facing a 3rd down and 7. DK Metcalf is going to run it out. Ahkello Witherspoon takes that away. Now here we see the 49ers doing something a little bit unusual right away. Kerry Hyder Jr. is going to play some pass defense here. He's dropping back into pass defense. And as it turns out, he's actually in a great position to help defend the route of Tyler Lockett. But he's not in position to do anything about the route of Jacob Hollister. And we can see that Jimmy Ward is going to have to react very quickly if he wants to prevent Hollister from getting the first down. Ward makes a great tackle. Outstanding. Stopping Hollister short with a big hit is becoming something of a tradition for the 49ers. So the 49ers get the ball back, and they're pretty deep in their own territory. Now watch Carlos Dunlap here, as it looks like he lays a bit of a late hit on C.J. Beathard. Let's take a look from the other angle and see if we can get a better view of it. Okay, here he is. Let's take a watch and see. That's pretty egregious. That should have been a penalty for roughing the passer. So the Seahawks go on a couple of long drives, and they end up kicking a couple of different field goals here. And I'm not showing you these because there's a lot of action that happens in the second half and late in the game, and I want to make sure we have enough time to look at that. But they build up a 6-0 lead here. The 49ers start off faking a handoff to Jeff Wilson Jr. The whole point of this is to get Dunlap to commit to going to the inside to try to tackle Wilson. When he does, C.J. Beathard will pull the ball back and carry the ball himself to the outside with Kyle Juszczyk as the lead blocker. Now here we see something extraordinarily rare. Kyle Juszczyk missing a block. He probably should have just gone straight up to DJ Reed and laid the block on. Instead, he hesitates a little bit, and it allows Reed to come over and lay a big hit on CJ Beathard. Now Reed used to play for the 49ers, and here we see some good sportsmanship as he helps CJ Beathard up after the play. Now the Seahawks end up getting the ball back, and here they're facing a 3rd down and 8. The 49ers are already down 6, so they don't want to let them get anything going. So here they decide to blitz Fred Warner. Now he's initially stuffed, as you can see Wilson has excellent pass protection on the play. But almost like a running back that bounces to the outside, that's exactly what Warner does. Now ordinarily this wouldn't work, it would probably take way too long. But here we can see that the 49ers are doing an excellent job on the back end, and all the Seahawks receivers are covered. This is complementary football. Wilson is crushed, and the Seahawks have to punt. 49ers get the ball back. You can see there's 5 minutes to go in the second quarter. We're well into this game, and the Niners haven't gotten anything going, and here they're facing a 3rd down and 14. They're getting a little tired of this, so Kyle Shanahan calls a deep shot. Unfortunately, the Seahawks defense knows this. They know it's 3rd down and 14, and they stick everybody way back on defense. But Richie James just outruns everybody. This is exactly what we saw in New Orleans. If you remember in that game, they brought CJ in specifically to attempt the long pass. But he hadn't been warmed up, he wasn't expecting to go in the game, and your arm just isn't going to respond in that situation. Well, this is a little bit different. We're well into the game here, and it's the perfect time to call this shot. Man, that throw was right on the money, too. Let's take another look. Man, that's great. Okay, couple plays later, it's 3rd down and 8. Niners still need to get a little more yardage to get in the field goal range here. And here we see the Seahawks defense make a little bit of a mistake. They're playing a zone, and nobody accounts for George Kittle. Now, this isn't a broken play, and we can see that CJ has already started his throwing motion. I believe this is something that the 49ers identified on film before the game, and were ready to go with this play. Now, immediately afterwards, you see the Seahawks defenders discussing it with each other, making sure that this won't happen again. The play gets San Francisco into field goal range, and when the drive stalls, they kick a field goal, making the score 6-3. But hold up. Before we move on, let's go back and take another look, because that wasn't Robbie Gould that kicked that field goal. Number 7, no, not Colin Kaepernick, that's Tristan Vizcaino from the University of Washington, and he had been on Minnesota's practice squad, which indicates they like him. You usually don't keep a kicker on your practice squad. But the 49ers needed him because Robbie Gould was put on the COVID list. And here we can see that it's a high snap, but Vizcaino has no problem, and he boots that thing right through. He might be a good kicker in the NFL in the years to come. We'll have to keep an eye on him. So after that drive, the Niners kick off, and you can see there's just 25 seconds left, and the Seahawks are on their own 25-yard line. And usually you want a little bit more time. You want 30 seconds or more than 30 seconds, but the Seahawks are going to try to get some points here. The 49ers respond by sending a massive blitz. They're going to have Dante Johnson and the 3 down linemen come off the left side. On the right side, they've brought in defensive end Alex Barrett, and he's going to rush with Azeez Al-Shiar. And then finally, Fred Warner is going to come on a delayed blitz after he sees the running back stay in to protect. But watch Dante Johnson on this play. Johnson makes a great play, and it's a huge sack that essentially ends the first half. Dante Johnson might surprise you to learn has played in the NFL for 7 years now. Bounced around the league a little bit, but always trying to improve. Maybe not the player that, we want him to be, but always improving, and the 49ers definitely use him in the right spot here. Now, if you're wondering why the tackle, Cedric Ogdui, didn't pick him up, it's because he's waiting for Eric Armstead to come around on the stunt. He does try to react, but it's comically too late. Let's move ahead to the third quarter. Now, CJ does have Jeff Wilson Jr. wide open here, but you can see he's under tremendous pressure from Collier. And watch closely as CJ gets the pass off. Collier's arm goes up and maybe hits Beathard a little high. Now, the officials call roughing the passer for this. People like to use the phrase ticky-tack call. They used to say tough call. It was a tough call, maybe technically correct, but a tough call. Maybe a makeup call for what happened in the first half. They don't really do that, but, here I could definitely see it. In any event, it puts the 49ers at midfield, and they'd started to get their offense going at the end of the first half, and here they have a great opportunity to keep it going, and Jeff Wilson Jr. hurts the defense. Let's go back to the snap. This play reminds me a lot of when the 49ers used to leverage their offensive line and hand the ball to Frank Gore. Here we see great blocks from George Kittle and Charlie Warner. Notice Mike McGlinchey coming around as well. Finally, Kyle Juszczyk will be the lead blocker for Jeff Wilson Jr. Now, Mike McGlinchey has a very poor pass blocking grade this year, but he has an excellent run blocking grade. And notice linebacker KJ Wright understandably decides that the best course of action is to just go down and cut him here. Almost like he's throwing a block on himself, but I think he forgot that he's on defense. And to cap it all off, watch Kyle Juszczyk block 2 defenders on this play. It's an 18-yard gain for Jeff Wilson Jr., and it puts the 49ers in position to tie the game with another field goal, making the score 6-6. Now it's 3rd down and 8 for Seattle, and their offense is at risk of stalling a little bit here. They would like to pick this up. So their plan is to have DK Metcalf run past the line of scrimmage and then turn around and catch a pass. But we know that these kinds of routes aren't necessarily DK Metcalf's strength, and Ahkello Witherspoon does a great job of defending this pass. And Witherspoon is feeling himself. Maybe fortunate he didn't get a taunting penalty there, which would have given the Seahawks an automatic first down. But nah, he made a great play, and he's having a great resurgence to his career at the end of this season, so he's going to celebrate. Now the 49ers get the ball, and they've got good field position here. To make matters worse for Seattle, George Kittle is absolutely wide open here. Now, he sees this big hole in the defense and kind of starts to sit up in the hole. But you can see the ball is already in the air. C.J. Beathard has already thrown this pass, and he's throwing it to where he thought George Kittle was running to. So Kittle has to make an adjustment here, and he makes one of the most terrific catches you'll ever see from a tight end.
Oh, you can!
41-yard gain on the play. Now the 49ers would like to reward George Kittle, and here they call a play specifically designed for him. They start off with a fake handoff to Jeff Wilson Jr. This draws in the defense. George Kittle, who's pretending to block, will then cut to the corner. But then CJ throws a wildly bad pass to Kendrick Bourne and completely ignores George Kittle, who was wide open on the play. And watch his reaction here. He knows what a terrible play he's just made. This play was specifically designed for George Kittle, something that was certainly said when this play was installed. So this has to be, without a doubt, the worst pass of C.J. Beathard's career, and you can see how frustrated George Kittle is. The 49ers have to settle for a field goal, and although they take the lead, they're going to spend a long time thinking about those points that they could have had. But the 49ers get the ball back, and when you have a bad play, you have to forget about it and just move on to the next one. And the 49ers offense is really on a roll now, and they pick up right where they left off. They scored on 3 consecutive possessions, and the Seahawks don't want to make it a fourth. So Ken Norton Jr., understandably, gets a little creative with his defense, but here I think he gets a little too cute. The first thing we notice is that they have 6 men up on the line of scrimmage. Now up top we notice 3 wide receivers against just 2 Seattle defenders. So what's their thinking here? What's their plan? Are they going to blitz? Are they not going to blitz? They've got to have a plan for sure. They're going to rush with their 4 defensive linemen. The middle linebacker is going to drop back and eventually pick up the running back coming out of the backfield. George Kittle is going to run a route, and understandably, the Seahawks put 2 defenders on him, especially after what happened on that last drive. River Craycraft will go deep, and he's going to be picked up by Shaq Griffin. So who then is going to pick up Kendrick Bourne? Well, I can tell you what happens. Bourne runs downways a little bit and then runs to the sideline after Craycraft gets ahead of him. The safety Amati drops back into the middle of the field and keeps his eyes on C.J. Beathard. When he sees C.J. throw the ball to Bourne, then he runs over to make the tackle. I'm not sure if this was the intent of the play. It was definitely designed to try to confuse C.J., but it doesn't work at all. And Kendrick Bourne picks up 27 yards on the play. Poor planning, worse execution by the Seahawks. Now you see the Seahawks all looking around after the play, wondering what in the heck was supposed to happen there, because that definitely wasn't it. So now the 49ers are faced with a 4th down and 3. But notice where the ball is. They're on their own 37-yard line, and this is exactly the situation we talked about last week. A lot of teams here would go for it because they're too far away for the field goal, but too close to punt. Last week they couldn't do it because it was 4th down and 13. But here, it's only 4th down and 3. The 49ers say no problem. But there is a problem. We see that all the receivers for the 49ers are covered. And just look at that Seahawks defensive backfield there. It's just littered with defenders. Looks like they're playing with 15 people on defense. The reason they're able to do this is because they're only rushing 3. So the pass protection for CJ is actually really good here. He could stand there for a while if he wanted to, but he decides to scramble. Not necessarily buying time, maybe just getting away from the pressure, trying to make something happen. And here is where you see the key moment in the play. Kendrick Bourne sees his quarterback scrambling. And what do you do when you see your quarterback scrambling? You run towards him. Kendrick Bourne led the team with 76 receiving yards. He also finished the season with a career-high 667 receiving yards. He has improved each and every year and makes big catches in clutch situations. And I'm going to double down on my previous statement. I would not be surprised at all if the 49ers bring him back. Maybe he'll even attract some interest in the free agent market. That would be interesting. But now the quarter has ended. It's the same drive, but the teams have switched sides, and the 49ers waste no time here getting Jeff Wilson Jr. the football. Dan Brunskill and Jeff School open the door, and you can see Laken Tomlinson is bearing down on Bobby Wagner. And the interesting thing is Wagner just kind of moves out of the way here. Unclear if he thought that maybe Wilson was going to head in that direction, or if he just made a business decision. You be the judge. In any event, Jeff Wilson Jr. walks into the end zone. Significant score, as it now puts the 49ers up 10 points in the fourth quarter. Now, last week we looked at the game against the Cardinals where they were essentially asleep for the entire game, and so far, Seattle's been asleep for 3 quarters, but they're sort of famously aware of when they need to wake up. And here they start off with a nice pass, and then the Niners hit them late out of bounds. That's a personal foul. Can't do that. Gives the Seahawks an extra 15 yards. And that is just the spark that Seattle needed to finally get their offense going. And here they go for the jugular. Wilson fakes the toss to the running back. Notice the 49ers defense react. And then, in a play 49er fans are familiar with, Will Dissly, who's pretending to block, sneaks out the other side. And Tarvarius Moore has a pretty good shot at him here. It's hard to make a tackle in the open field, and Will Dissly burns him pretty badly. Now, Kerry Hyder has Russell Wilson dead to rights here, but as we've seen Wilson do so many times in his career, he shows great elusiveness. Now, Hyder does get his hands on him, and interestingly enough, if he yanks him down here, that would not be a penalty for a horse collar tackle. That rule does not apply to quarterbacks under pressure. Nevertheless, Wilson is able to get out of this, and he scrambles. Tyler Lockett sees his quarterback scrambling and runs towards him. Fred Warner would try to grab him and prevent him from doing that, and that penalty would be called. But despite being held, Lockett still is able to come over and make the catch for a touchdown. Very impressive play between Lockett and Russell Wilson. Notice the NFL Films guy getting a great shot here. Look for a highlight coming your way soon. Now, Wilson showed some things on this play that we haven't seen as much from him in recent years. For one thing, the elusiveness. The ability to get out of that sack, and then look at this throw. Oh, that is so good. He still has the ability to dazzle. So it's 12-16, and now the Seahawks just need to kick the extra point to make it a 3-point ball game. And they miss, and that's a significant miss because now they would need a touchdown to take the lead. Seahawks get the ball back, and now there's just 4 minutes left in the game. Let's go. It looks like Darian Daniels has a clean shot at Russell Wilson, but once again we see his elusiveness. Now notice Eric Armstead sticking his arm up there. That's usually an indication that he's being held. Now a lot of the time that holding calls occur is when the defensive player suddenly changes directions and the offensive player is surprised by it and isn't ready, and that's kind of what it looks like happens here. This is far from an egregious call. He lets go of him right away. And it's been said that officials could call holding on every play. They have to decide when to call, when not to call. I'm not especially upset with that non-call. That was my dog, Frank Gore, in the background saying hi. But unclear if Armstead would have gotten to Wilson anyway in that situation. So it all comes down to this. 4th and 5 on the 5-yard line with just 2:28 to go. Amazing how these games so often come down to the final play between the Niners and the Seahawks. Two very evenly matched teams, Pete Carroll and Kyle Shanahan, two of the best coaches in the league. And here we go. Notice Ahkello Witherspoon with outside leverage here. In other words, he's giving Tyler Lockett the inside of the field. Why would he do that? Well, let's go back to the snap. Notice the amount of space on the right side of the field there. If Witherspoon gave him that space, Tyler Lockett would just take it. Witherspoon can't allow that. So now we're back here and we see that this play has turned into a race between Lockett and Witherspoon, and we know how fast Lockett is, and he has a head start. Now we know Witherspoon made the right decision to play with outside leverage, so it begs the question, is there anything different the 49ers could have done with their scheme here? Could they have had an extra safety over there? Well, sure they could have, but they made a different decision here. Instead, they decided to rush with Azeez Al-Shiar and Fred Warner. And Fred Warner almost gets to Wilson. The 49ers like to send big blitzes in these key situations, and the Seahawks were ready for it with the perfect play. One other thing to notice, check out the job Chris Carson does of slowing down Fred Warner just enough. What a pass. Russell Wilson, slowing down a little bit, but not done anytime soon. Now the 49ers are in a great situation here. They need a touchdown, but they have the 2-minute warning and all 3 timeouts available to them. But C.J. Beathard fumbles the football and the Seahawks recover. Let's see if we can find out what happened. Check out Carlos Dunlap with the Dwight Freeney spin. We've been hard on Mike McGlinchey all year, but that was just a great move. Also noticed Mayoa putting a lot of pressure on, but I'm okay with the block of Jeff School here too. He made him go the long way around. Now, it looks like CJ might have a lane here, and it's been suggested that maybe he needed to step up. But we're going to go back and take a look at how quickly this pressure gets on him. His back foot barely hits, and the pressure is already on him. Now he tries to get the pass off, and that's where the fumble occurs. I think the best thing for CJ to do there would have been to tuck that ball away, take the sack, and then you've got 2 more downs to try to pick up your first down. Instead, the Seahawks get the ball, and they punch it in. So this game is over. All of a sudden, the Seahawks are the ones up by 10. 20 fourth-quarter points by the Seahawks. So with a 10-point lead and 1:26 to go, we see the Seahawks defenders giving Richie James a lot of space here. And that's the right move. The worst thing they could do is give up a long bonehead touchdown to Richie James. The smart move is to set themselves up to make the tackle. And notice, too, how they defend the sideline. They're not going to let him get out of bounds here. Let him catch the ball. Make sure he's in bounds so that the clock keeps running and working against San Francisco. Same situation here. Kendrick Bourne is wide open as you can get. The Seahawks defenders are intentionally giving him space, letting him catch this ball, keeping him in bounds, keeping him from scoring the long bonehead touchdown. Let the clock work against the 49ers, and this is kind of something similar you see in other games too. One example I can think of is in chess. You know, you have an advantage in one area, you might trade it for an advantage in another area. If you have a space advantage, you might end up getting a material advantage where you can take some of your opponent's pieces, for instance. This is exactly what the Seahawks are doing. They're trading part of that 10-point lead in exchange for time coming off the clock so they can win the game. Here we see the Niners have Jeff Wilson Jr. matched up against rookie outside linebacker Jordan Brooks. Definitely a mismatch. When Wilson Jr. makes a move to the outside, Brooks can't stay with him. From this angle, we get a nice view of what a nice pass this was from C.J. Beathard. Now, the Niners spent a lot of time getting that ball down into the end zone instead of kicking the field goal early and going for the onside kick early. And it's a little unclear why they changed their strategy this week. Well, they didn't have their regular kicker, and you see Mitch Wishnowsky make a bit of a feeble attempt at an onside kick there. So Seattle's going to recover, and all they have to do is kneel down here and win the game. Niners can't stop the clock. But instead they run a play, and it's one that the 49ers have seen before. We see David Moore going in motion, and Wilson's going to flip the ball forward to him, and he's going to take it for, 5 or 7 yards here. And he goes out of bounds, so they're going to have to run another play to stop the clock, and this really upset the Niners at first. There were some hard feelings at the end of the game, and then Wilson kind of stuck around on the field talking to Jimmy Ward, some of the other leaders on the Niners, and explaining to him that they wanted to get David Moore his incentive. He needed one more catch to reach his incentive for the season. So kind of a class move on the part of the Seahawks, who then kneel down. You can see some of the hard feelings there. But while that was a very good reason to run that play, I don't think that was the only reason. Let's go back to a play that the Niners ran against the Rams earlier this year. It's the same play, and we scored a touchdown with it with Deebo Samuel. The Seahawks play the Rams next week, and the Niners have burned the Rams with that play a lot. By running that play at the end of the game, Seattle knows that LA will have to practice for that. Practice time limits are very strictly controlled nowadays, so you have to pick and choose which plays to practice for. Pete Carroll and the Seahawks going for every advantage possible against the Rams, especially considering the Rams have kind of owned the Seahawks in recent years. We'll be curious to see how that game turns out. The Seahawks did beat LA just a few weeks ago when Jared Goff hurt his thumb, and if Goff does play this weekend, he's not going to be 100%. But we'll have to see how that goes. Shrewd move on the part of Seattle at the end of this game. Well, what an impressive performance by the San Francisco 49ers in this game. You know, the Seahawks really should have destroyed the 49ers. Niners didn't have any of their key weapons, right? I mean, they didn't have Brandon Ayuk. They didn't have Deebo Samuel. They didn't have Jimmy Garoppolo or Nick Mullins. They're down to their third string quarterback. They didn't have Trent Williams. They had George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk, and that was about it. And they still played a very competitive game, losing by just 3 points. Very, very well-played game by the 49ers. Very impressive. Really just the future is bright in San Francisco. You know, Kyle Shanahan, man, that guy is a wizard. He just does incredible things, making the most out of what he has. And really, that's what you want in a coach, right? Somebody who can accentuate the strengths of your players and minimize their weaknesses. And that's what Shanahan definitely does. They've really gotten good at using their personnel, coming up with game plans that are competitive, and staying in each and every game. Now, there's a couple of big changes that we're going to see in the offseason. There's a lot of players the 49ers need to re-sign. I believe our priorities should probably be Trent Williams, Kyle Juszczyk, our key pieces, right? Jason Verrett, we've got to secure that back end. It's going to cost a lot of money. We might not be able to make any big splashy moves in free agency, but that's okay. Let's secure the key pieces of our team so that we can be competitive again next year. The other question marks, Robert Saleh, right? Has interviewed with 6 teams so far, and he's probably going to get hired at least by one of them. I would think as of Friday afternoon, there's been no news yet on that front. But I think any day now, maybe even by this time this video goes live, we'll have an answer there. And, of course, we will wish nothing but the best for Robert Saleh. It sounds like the 49ers already have a good plan in place of who they want to, try to fill those shoes. And Saleh and Shanahan have already had good, productive discussions about who he's going to be bringing with him, who's going to stay in San Francisco. Very, very good relationship between Shanahan and Saleh, and it will be interesting, to see which team Saleh goes to if that relationship comes to, fruition in the future in terms of negotiations, trades, things like that. Of course, some of you are no doubt thinking about the fact that what is considered to be the odds-on favorite to grab Robert Saleh would be maybe the Detroit Lions, right? And they have a certain quarterback that some people would like to see play in San Francisco. Could there be a trade there, especially if Saleh and Shanahan get together like that? That's going to be really interesting to see. Ultimately, I don't think so. The 49ers have been pretty clear. They're going to stick with Garoppolo. Now, they've said, of course, if we have the chance to upgrade, we will. Every team always says that every year. There's only, one Tom Brady in the league, right? So, yeah, if they can potentially upgrade, they will. But newsflash, it's going to be really hard to upgrade at that position. Garoppolo has a salary that is actually pretty good for the 49ers. I know people they think it's high in terms of the fact that it's a lot of money, but in terms of the impact to the salary cap, it's not so high. It's, I believe, the 15th highest salary in the league at this point. It was high when they signed him, but that was several years ago, don't forget. So that'll be interesting to see. Of course, we have the draft coming up. We have some major pieces we need to secure. Our defensive backfield, offensive line needs help, pieces like that. So will we trade up to get a quarterback? Probably not, but you never know. If they get the opportunity to go up and get a guy like Zach Wilson, that might be an interesting move. We'll have to wait and see. We just don't know. We don't know what the future brings, but I think whatever the future brings, we can feel pretty good about it, right? We're still going to have Kyle Shanahan. We're still going to have our star receivers, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. You know that running game under Shanahan's going to be good. I mean, he just has a way of finding these backs and getting incredible results out of them. The defense is going to be returning Nick Bosa next year. We'll have to see how his health is. But I think overall, next year is going to be right back on track. This year was completely derailed by this wild spate of injuries. Of course, we had the pandemic, which impacted league operations and operations of the 49ers. Heck, they had to move their home and stay in Arizona for weeks and weeks and months. And that's very difficult for the players. They don't get to see their families. They don't get to sleep in their own beds. They might not even get to eat their favorite meals and do the things they normally do. Their routines are completely disrupted, and they fought valiantly through that. In the end, they came up a little bit short, but I think if you're looking forward to next season, hopefully we'll see a little bit of a return to normalcy, at least in terms of the 49ers winning a lot of games. I know that, right? That's what I would like to see a return to. And I think you will see that. I feel really good, really confident, and this game was very encouraging to watch. The future is bright in San Francisco.